Ethan Parker walked into that blind date, expecting nothing more than polite conversation and a quick exit. When Olivia Bennett smiled and said yes to seeing him again, he believed it was the start of something rare, something real. He let himself hope. He let himself fall. But then the truth surfaced, quiet and devastating. Olivia had not come to that coffee shop out of curiosity or chance. She had come running from something much bigger than him, and her yes had never really been about Ethan at all. Ethan Parker had not wanted to go. He had made that clear to Marcus 3 separate times over the span of a week, and Marcus had ignored him every single time. They sat in the back corner of the auto shop where Ethan worked, grease still under his nails from the transmission he had just replaced, and Marcus leaned against the toolbox with his arms crossed like he was prepared to wait all day. "You have not been on a date in over a year," Marcus said. His tone was matter-of-fact, the kind of voice people used when stating something everyone already knew. You work, you go home, you watch the Broncos lose. That is your entire life right now. Ethan wiped his hands on a rag that had seen better days. "I like my life. You are lying to yourself. I am not looking for anything." Ethan tossed the rag onto the workbench and turned to face his friend. "I do not need you setting me up with some woman you barely know just because you think I am lonely." Marcus shrugged. "Her name is Olivia. She is a friend of Claire's. Smart, independent, not interested in games. Claire thinks you two would get along. Claire thought I would get along with that accountant last year, the one who talked about tax codes for 45 minutes. This is different. It is always different." But Marcus had a stubborn streak that rivaled anyone Ethan had ever met, and by the end of that conversation, Ethan had agreed to one coffee. 1 hour. Nothing more. He told himself it was easier than continuing to argue, but the truth was simpler than that. He was tired of saying no to everything. The coffee shop Marcus had chosen was tucked into a quiet block in downtown Denver, the kind of place with exposed brick walls and mismatched furniture that was supposed to look intentional. Ethan arrived 5 minutes early out of habit, ordered a black coffee, and sat by the window where he could watch the street. He checked his phone twice. He wondered if she would show up at all. Then the door opened, and a woman stepped inside. She was not what he had expected, though he could not have said what he had expected in the first place. She wore a dark coat over a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a way that looked effortless, and when she scanned the room, her gaze landed on him as with a kind of quiet certainty. She walked over without hesitation. "Ethan?" she asked. He stood. "Olivia." She smiled, and it was not the polite smile people gave when they were performing. It reached her eyes. "I was worried I would be late. The parking around here is terrible." "I got here early," Ethan admitted. "Habit." She ordered tea at the counter, something herbal that smelled faintly of mint, and when she sat down across from him, the conversation started without the usual awkwardness that came with blind dates. She asked what he did, and he told her he was a mechanic. She did not wrinkle her nose or make a joke about dirty hands. She just nodded and said her father used to work on cars in their garage when she was a kid. "What do you do?" Ethan asked. "I work in project management for a design firm," Olivia said. She wrapped both hands around her cup, as if the warmth mattered more than the drink itself. "It is not as exciting as it sounds. Mostly emails and spreadsheets. Still sounds more exciting than changing oil. I do not know. There is something satisfying about fixing things, is there not? You see a problem. You solve it. It is finished." Ethan found himself nodding. "Most of the time, yeah. Not always clean, but it is honest work." She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "That matters to you. Honest work." It does. There was a beat where neither of them spoke, but it was not uncomfortable. It felt like the kind of silence that came when two people were actually listening to each other instead of waiting for their turn to talk. Ethan took a sip of his coffee and realized he had stopped checking the time. They talked for well over an hour. She told him about growing up in a small town outside Colorado Springs, about moving to Denver for college and never leaving. He told her about his years in the service before he came back and learned how to rebuild engines. She did not ask the usual questions people asked about the military, the ones that made him feel like a specimen under glass. She just listened. At some point, the conversation shifted to smaller things. Books they had read, places they wanted to visit but never had. She said she had always wanted to see the Pacific Northwest, the kind of forests where the trees were so tall you could not see the sky. He said he had driven through Oregon once and felt the same way. When Ethan finally glanced at his phone, nearly 2 hours had passed. The coffee shop had started to empty out, and the barista behind the counter was wiping down tables with the slow, deliberate movements of someone ready to close up. Olivia noticed at the same time. "I should probably go." "Yeah, me too." They stood, and Ethan felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. It was not nervousness. It was the quiet realization that he did not want the conversation to end. He walked her to the door, and when they stepped outside into the cool evening air, he made a decision before he could talk himself out of it. "Would you want to do this again?" he asked. Olivia looked at him, and for just a second, something flickered across her face. It was too quick for him to name. Then she smiled, and the smile was genuine. "Yes," she said. "I would like that." That was how it started. One yes. One answer that felt easy and true. They met again 3 days later, this time for dinner at a small Italian place Ethan knew that did not try too hard. The conversation picked up right where it had left off, as if no time had passed at all. She ordered pasta with too much garlic and did not apologize for it. He liked that. He liked the way she laughed when he told a story about a customer who had tried to fix his own alternator with duct tape and prayer. By the second week, they had fallen into a rhythm. Coffee on weekday mornings before work, when their schedules allowed. Dinners on weekends. A movie she picked that he had never heard of, but ended up enjoying. A hike up one of the trails outside the city, where the air was thin and the view stretched out for miles. Ethan found himself thinking about her when she was not around. He noticed the small things, the way she always ordered her coffee with oat milk, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the way she listened when he talked, really listened, like what he said actually mattered. He had not felt this way in a long time, maybe ever. He had been in relationships before, the kind that fizzled out after a few months when the initial attraction wore off and there was nothing underneath to hold it together. This felt different. This felt like something that could last. One night, after they had been seeing each other for nearly 3 weeks, they sat in his truck in the parking lot outside her apartment building. The radio played low, some classic rock station he always had on, and the streetlights cast long shadows across the windshield. They had just come back from dinner, and neither of them had made a move to get out yet. "I like this," Ethan said. The words came out quieter than he intended, but he did not take them back. Olivia turned to look at her. "Like what?" "This. You. Us." He kept his eyes on the steering wheel, his hands resting at 10 and 2, even though the engine was off. "I was not expecting it." "Neither was I," she said softly. He looked over at her then, and the expression on her face was unreadable. There was warmth there, but also something else, something he could not quite place. Before he could ask, she leaned over and kissed him. It was brief, tentative, but it felt like an answer to a question he had not known how to ask. When she pulled back, She smiled. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night." He watched her walk up to her building, watched her disappear through the front door, and sat there for a long moment afterward. The engine ticked as it cooled. The radio shifted to a commercial. Ethan exhaled slowly and realized he was smiling. He had let himself hope. He had let himself fall. And at the time, that had felt like the right choice. The first time Ethan noticed something was off, they were sitting in his truck after a late dinner. It had been 5 weeks since their first coffee, and the relationship had settled into something comfortable. Easy. They had just finished splitting a pizza at a place near her apartment, and the conversation had drifted to the holidays coming up in a few months. "Thanksgiving is always a production at my family's place," Ethan said. He had one hand on the steering wheel, even though the engine was off, a habit he could not seem to break. "My mom cooks enough food for 20 people, even though it is just the 6 of us. You would think she is feeding an army." Olivia smiled, but it did not quite reach her eyes. "That sounds nice." "It is chaos, but yeah, nice chaos." He looked over at her. "What about you? Do you usually go back to Colorado Springs?" She glanced down at her hands. "Sometimes. It depends." "On what?" "Just depends." Her voice had gone quieter, and she reached for the door handle. "I should probably get inside. Early morning tomorrow." It was not late. It was barely 9:30. But Ethan did not push. He kissed her goodnight and watched her walk up to her building, the same way he always did. He sat in the truck afterward and tried to shake the feeling that she had just closed a door he had not known was there. It happened again the following week. They were walking through a farmer's market on a Saturday morning, the kind of aimless wandering that had become one of Ethan's favorite things about being with her. She stopped at a stand selling handmade pottery, picking up a small bowl and turning it over in her hands. "This would look good in your place," she said. "You think?" "Yeah, you need more color in that kitchen." He grinned. "You have been planning my interior design without telling me." She set the bowl down, and her smile faltered just slightly. "I'm just saying, you could use a few things that are not gray or beige. Maybe you could help me pick them out sometime." He said it casually, the way people did when they were imagining a future that included someone else. "We could make a day of it." Olivia looked at the pottery again, her fingers tracing the rim of the bowl. "Maybe." The word hung in the air between them, and Ethan felt something shift. It was not what she said. It was the way she said it. Like she was not sure there would be a day to make plans for. By the 7th week, the pattern had become impossible to ignore. Any mention of the future, anything beyond the immediate present, and Olivia would find a way to redirect. She never said no. She never pulled away. But she never said yes either. She lived entirely in the now, as if the days ahead did not exist. Ethan tried to tell himself it did not mean anything. Some people were just like that, present-focused, spontaneous. But Olivia was not spontaneous. She planned everything. She kept a calendar on her phone that was color-coded by category. She made reservations 3 weeks in advance. The avoidance was deliberate, and that made it worse. One evening, they were at her apartment for the first time in a while. She had cooked dinner, something simple with pasta and vegetables, and they ate on her couch with the television playing low in the background. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a name. "Mom." Olivia glanced at it and looked away. The phone buzzed again. Then a third time. Ethan watched her ignore it, watched the tension creep into her shoulders, and finally set down his fork. "You can answer that if you need to," he said. "I do not need to. It might be important. It is not." The phone stopped buzzing. A minute later, it started again. This time, the name was different. Dad. Olivia stood up abruptly, grabbed the phone, and walked into the kitchen. Ethan heard the low murmur of her voice, clipped and short, before the call ended. When she came back, her expression was carefully neutral. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked. "Fine." She sat down and picked up her fork, but she did not eat. He wanted to ask more. He wanted to know why she looked like someone had just demanded something from her she did not want to give. But the wall between them felt too solid to push against, so he let it go. 2 days later, Marcus asked him how things were going. They were in the shop again, surrounded by the familiar sounds of tools and engines, and the radio playing something from the 80s. Ethan was replacing brake pads on a sedan that had seen better days, and Marcus was supposed to be helping, but mostly just leaned against the workbench and talked. "You have been seeing her for what, almost 2 months now?" Marcus asked. "About that." "And?" Ethan tightened a bolt and did not look up. "And what? And how is it going?" "It is good." Marcus made a sound that suggested he did not believe that. "You do not sound like it is good." "It is." Ethan straightened and wiped his hands on a rag. "It is good. She is great. I just get the feeling there is something she is not telling me." "Like what?" "I do not know. That is the problem." He tossed the rag onto the bench. "Every time I bring up anything beyond next week, she shuts down. Not in an obvious way. Just enough that I notice." Marcus frowned. "You think she is seeing someone else?" "No, it is not that." Ethan was certain of that much at least. When they were together, Olivia was completely present, attentive, real. The problem was not her commitment to the moment. It was her refusal to acknowledge anything beyond it. "I think she is running from something." "Then ask her." Ethan had been thinking the same thing for days, but saying it out loud felt like admitting something he did not want to face. If he asked and she told him the truth, he might not like what he heard. If he asked and she did not tell him, that would be worse. But the question was already lodged in his chest, and it was not going away. The conversation happened on a Thursday night. Olivia had come over to his place after work, and they were supposed to watch a movie neither of them cared about. Instead, they sat on opposite ends of the couch, the television off, and the silence stretched until Ethan could not stand it anymore. "I need to ask you something," he said. Olivia turned to look at him, and her expression was already guarded. "Okay. Are you happy? With this? With us?" "Of course I am." The answer came too quickly, too automatic. "Then why does it feel like you are keeping one foot out the door?" She stiffened. "I am not." "You are." He kept his voice steady, but the frustration bled through anyway. "Every time I mention anything that is more than a week away, you change the subject. You will not talk about your family. You will not make plans. It is like you are here, but you are not really here." Olivia stood up. Her arms crossed over her chest. "That is not fair." "Then tell me I am wrong." Ethan stood too, facing her across the small living room. "Tell me, there is not something you are holding back." She looked at him for a long moment, and he saw the exact second she made the decision to stop hiding. Her shoulders dropped, her arms fell to her sides. When she spoke, her voice was quiet and raw. "I went on that blind date because I needed to prove something to myself," she said. Ethan felt the words land like a punch. "What?" "My family has been trying to set me up with someone for over a year. A guy I grew up with. Someone they think is stable and safe and the right choice." She let out a bitter laugh. "They have had it planned since we were in high school. He is a lawyer now. He has a good income, a good reputation. They want me to marry him. They expect me to marry him." Ethan stared at her. "And you do not want to?" "Of course I do not want to." Her voice cracked. But every time I try to say no, they find a way to make me feel like I am being selfish, like I owe them this. So when Claire mentioned the blind date, I said yes because I wanted to prove I still had a choice, that my life was not already decided for me. The room felt smaller, the air thinner. Ethan tried to process what she was saying, but all he could focus on was the one detail that mattered most. So when you said yes to seeing me again, it was not because of me. It was not just about you, Olivia admitted. Her eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. At first, but then I got to know you, and it became real. What I feel for you is real. But it started as something else. She did not answer. She did not have to. Ethan turned away, running a hand through his hair. He felt like an idiot, like he had been played, even though he knew that was not entirely fair. She had not lied to him. She had just not told him the whole truth. I should have told you sooner, Olivia said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I know that, but I did not know how, and the longer I waited, the harder it got. He turned back to face her. Do you even know what you want? I want this. She gestured between them, and the desperation in her voice was unmistakable. I want us, but you are still running from them. I'm trying not to. Trying is not the same as doing, Olivia. The words came out harsher than he meant them to, but he could not take them back. You are using me as an excuse to avoid making a real decision. That is not true. Is it not? He stepped closer, and the hurt in his chest was sharp and consuming. Because from where I am standing, it feels like I am just a temporary escape, a way to stall until you figure out what you actually want. Olivia flinched like he had struck her. You do not understand. Then help me understand. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The silence between them was suffocating. Ethan waited, hoping she would say something that would make this make sense. But she just stood there, with tears streaming down her face and her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Finally, Ethan exhaled slowly and stepped back. I think you should go. Ethan, I need time to think, and so do you. She looked at him like she wanted to argue, but then she nodded. She grabbed her coat from the chair and walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the knob, her back to him. I am sorry, she said. Ethan did not respond. He could not. The door closed behind her, and the apartment felt impossibly empty. He stood in the middle of the living room for a long time, staring at the space where she had been, and tried to figure out if what they had was worth saving, or if it had been broken from the start. Ethan did not call her. He did not text. He went to work, came home, and tried to pretend the silence did not feel like suffocation. Marcus asked him once if he had talked to Olivia, and Ethan said no, and Marcus had the good sense not to ask again. 3 days passed, then 5, then a week. He told himself he was done, that the relationship had been built on a lie, and there was no coming back from that. But every time he convinced himself he had made the right choice, he would remember the way she looked at him in those first few weeks, the way she listened, the way she laughed when he told a stupid joke, the way she had cried when she finally told him the truth. She had not been lying about her feelings. He knew that. But knowing it did not make it easier. On the 8th day, Marcus showed up at his apartment unannounced. Ethan opened the door to find his friend standing there with 2 beers and an expression that said he was not leaving until they talked. You look terrible, Marcus said. Thanks. Can I come in, or are you going to keep sulking alone? Ethan stepped aside and let him in. They sat on the couch, and Marcus handed him one of the beers. For a while, neither of them spoke. The television was off. The apartment was too quiet. Claire talked to Olivia, Marcus said eventually. Ethan took a drink and did not respond. She told her family no. Marcus looked over at him. The guy they wanted her to marry. She told them she was not doing it, that it was never going to happen. Ethan set the beer down on the coffee table. Good for her. She also told them about you. That got his attention. What did she say? That she met someone. That she was not going to let them decide her life for her anymore. Marcus leaned back against the couch. Claire said it did not go well. Her parents hung up on her, but she did it anyway. Ethan stared at the wall across from him. He tried to feel something other than the hollow ache that had taken up residence in his chest, but it would not shift. That does not change why she went on the date in the first place. No, it does not. Marcus turned the beer bottle in his hands. But it does change what she is doing now. What am I supposed to do with that? I do not know. That is your call. Marcus stood up and headed for the door. He stopped with his hand on the knob and looked back. But you should ask yourself if you are angrier about how it started or scared about what it could be. After Marcus left, Ethan sat alone in the quiet and let the questions sit with him. He had been hurt. He had felt used. But underneath all of that was something simpler and harder to admit. He was terrified. Terrified that if he let himself hope again, it would fall apart. Terrified that the foundation they had built was too fragile to hold. But he also could not stop thinking about the way Olivia had stood in his living room with tears running down her face and said the words, "I am sorry," like they were the only truth she had left. 2 days later, Olivia called him. He stared at the screen for 3 rings before he answered. "Hello." "Hi." Her voice was quiet, tentative. "I was not sure you would pick up." "I almost did not." There was a long stretch of silence, and Ethan could hear her breathing on the other end. Finally, she spoke. "I told my family about you. About us." "I heard." "Marcus told you?" "Yeah." Another silence. Then Olivia said, "I also told them I was not marrying the person they picked for me, that I was done letting them make my decisions." Ethan closed his eyes. "How did they take it?" "Not well," my mom cried. "My dad said I was throwing my life away." She let out a shaky breath. "But I did it, and I meant it." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you were right." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "I was using you as an excuse, at first, but then it became real, and I was too scared to admit that I had started this for the wrong reasons. I thought if I just kept moving forward, it would not matter how it began. But it does matter, and you deserve better than someone who was not honest with you from the start." Ethan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "So what are you saying?" "I am saying I do not want to lose you, but I also know I do not have the right to ask you to stay." She was crying now, and she was not trying to hide it. "I just needed you to know that what I feel for you is real. It has been real for a long time, and I am sorry I did not tell you the truth sooner." He wanted to say something. He wanted to tell her it was okay, or that it was not okay, or that he did not know what he felt anymore. But the words would not come. So he just sat there and listened to her cry on the other end of the line until she finally whispered goodbye and hung up. Ethan stayed on the couch for a long time after that. The apartment was dark. The city outside was loud with traffic and voices and life continuing, whether he was ready for it or not. He thought about the way this had started. A blind date he had not wanted to go on. A woman who had said yes for reasons that had nothing to do with him. A relationship built on a foundation that was not as solid as he had believed. But he also thought about the way she had looked at him across the table in that coffee shop, the way she had listened when he talked about his work, his life, the things that mattered to him, the way she had kissed him in his truck like it meant something. The way she had stood in his living room and told him the truth, even though it cost her everything. People came together for all kinds of reasons. Some of them were good. Some of them were messy. But the reasons did not matter as much as what people chose to do after. He picked up his phone and called her back. She answered on the first ring. "Ethan, I do not know if this is going to work," he said. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "I do not know if we can get past how this started, but I want to try." She let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You do?" "Yeah, I do." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the lights of the city. "But we do it differently this time. No more hiding. No more avoiding the hard stuff. If this is going to work, it has to be honest. Completely honest." "I can do that," Olivia said. Her voice was thick with tears, but there was something else there too. Relief. Hope. "I promise. I can do that." "Okay. Okay." They met the next evening at the same coffee shop where they had first sat across from each other 2 months ago. Olivia was already there when Ethan arrived, sitting by the window with a cup of tea she had not touched. She looked up when he walked in, and the expression on her face was raw and open in a way it had never been before. He sat down across from her, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then Olivia reached across the table and took his hand. "I am going to tell you everything," she said. "About my family, about the pressure, about why I said yes that first night. All of it. I am listening." And she did. She told him about growing up in a house where expectations were currency and love came with conditions. She told him about the lawyer her parents had chosen, about the dinners and the pressure, and the way they had made her feel like her choices did not matter. She told him about the moment Claire mentioned the blind date, and how it had felt like a door opening in a room that had been locked for too long. Ethan listened. He did not interrupt. He did not judge. He just let her talk until she had nothing left to say. When she finished, he squeezed her hand. "Thank you for telling me. I should have done it sooner." "Yeah, you should have." He looked at her, and the hurt was still there, but it was not the only thing anymore. "But you are doing it now, and that matters." They left the coffee shop together and walked through the city as the sun set and the streetlights flickered on one by one. They did not make any grand promises. They did not pretend the past 2 months had been perfect or that the road ahead would be easy. They just walked side by side and chose to keep going. Because sometimes people came together for reasons that were not entirely pure. Sometimes the beginning was messy and complicated and built on foundations that were not as strong as they should have been. But the people who were willing to face the truth, to admit their mistakes, to choose honesty over comfort, those were the ones who had a chance at something real. Ethan Parker had walked into that blind date, expecting nothing. And Olivia Bennett had said yes for all the wrong reasons. But what they built after, what they chose to build with open eyes and honest hearts, that was entirely their own.